Purim in this country is all of Adar, right? And it's celebrated. If you like the kids that go to Gan every single day, they have to come back in a different costume, right? It's huge, right? And it's interesting that we place so much emphasis on the costumes, because if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, that is not one of the halachot of Purim, right? If you look in your source number one, we have 4 mitzvot midrabanan on the holiday of Purim, and they are, right? They all start with a mem, right? The first one is, well, actually look in the, we'll see it actually in the Megillah, right? La'asot otam yimei mishteh. First of all, that we should have, number 1, mem is mishteh, right? We are going to have our Purim Suda. V'simcha u'mishloach manot, that's the second mem, right? We have mishloach manot, ish l're'ehu, matanot le'avyonim, and we have to give money to the poor. And what's the fourth one? Megillah, right? Okay, so we have four mem mitzvot, right? Megillah, matanot le'avyonim, mishloach manot, and mishteh, right? And there's no mem for wearing costumes. Maybe masks, mem, right? Right? And yet, if you ask, any kid, what are you doing for Purim? What's the first thing they're going to talk about? Is their costume. Many adults also, right? Right? Purim equals costumes, masks. And the question is, right, why is there such an emphasis on these costumes? The Shulchan Aruch does not talk about it at all. And the Ramah very, very briefly mentions the idea of wearing a costume. Right? What does he say? He looks at source number 2. The fact that some people have a custom to wear masks on Purim, he goes on to discuss whether is it okay that a gever is lovesh simlat isha, a man is wearing a woman's clothing, a woman is wearing men's clothing. Is that permissible or not? That's not the topic of this year. But you see over here that it's like tangentially mentioned. Okay, there is such a minhag, but it doesn't bring down its halacha, and it does not give any explanation. So what is this, emphasis that we place on costumes? What is the purpose of the costumes? Why do we have costumes? All right, sometimes you think when you grow up in America, you're like, okay, so all the people who are walking around on Halloween, they're dressed up, so it's our opportunity, right? Is there something deeper going on than just that we also want to be able to dress up, right? So I think the answer is that if we look in the Megillah itself, right, we see that there are many, many characters in the Megillah who are in costume. Right? The first character is Esther herself. Right? In source number 3, the Megillah says, Lo yida Esther et amma vet moladata. Esther did not tell anyone what nationality she came from. Ki Mordechai tziva aleh shelo tagid. Mordechai told her not to tell anyone where she came from. Why? Why can't she say? What did you say? Because she's Jewish, and therefore what? She's Jewish, and if she's Jewish, then maybe he won't want to marry her. Or maybe he will want to marry her. Or maybe he'll kill her. Or maybe if he doesn't know, he'll be more intrigued and he will want to marry her. We don't even know if we want him to marry her or not, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of discussion amongst the Mefarshim. We're not really sure why, but Mordechai says, do not tell him where you're coming from, and she doesn't. It says, everyone who saw her loved her, right? Why? She had a chen. But not only that, okay, so it's one thing she was in costume, she didn't tell anyone where she came from, but not only that, every single nation, the Gemara says, every nation thought that she was from their nation, right? If you remember, the empire of Achashverosh was 127 provinces, and every single person in every one of those 127 countries all thought Esther came from their country, right? That's a really good costume, right? Because, maybe our kids and our grandchildren are dressing up every hour, but they don't have 127 costumes all at the same time, right? At the same time, the Chinese were looking at her and saying, wow, you must be Chinese. And the Indians were saying, well, you must be Indian, right? Everyone thought that she was from her nation. So that's a really good costume, right? And there's, in fact, I saw there's a minhag to actually, for this reason, to dress up as one of the nations, right? So, for example, my daughter decided she's dressing up as an Indian. I don't know if that's politically correct or not. I don't even know if she knows. I don't know how she knows what an Indian is. But right, she's following that minhag that she wants to look like another nation, another nationality. Right, that's Esther. Then we have Mordechai. You can come in, or not. Hi, Mordechai. What does Mordechai do? Mordechai, we know, at one point, right, he's dressed how? There's an emphasis on his clothing. How is he dressed? Sackcloth, right? We look at source number 5. Mordechai yadat kol asher na'asa v'yikra Mordechai begadav v'yibash sak v'efer. Mordechai finds out about Haman's decree, and he puts on sak v'efer and a sackcloth. On the other hand, how else does he dress? Big day machlut, right? He goes out. Haman's leading him on the horse. Mordechai yatzav yifnei hamelech b'levush machlut. He's wearing king's clothes, tchelet, chor, ateret, zahav, all different kinds of materials, right? And so we have this emphasis of Mordechai is changing his clothing, sending out different messages. I don't know if it's a costume, right? But he's definitely using his clothing to represent something, right? Then we have Vashti. What's Vashti's costume? What did you say? A horn? A tail, right? Okay, so Vashti, right? We're told in the Gemara that when Achashverosh is in the party and he commands Vashti to come out to the party, she doesn't want to go out. Why does she not want to go out? Maybe she's naked. Maybe she is just standing up for her own rights. Or maybe, the Gemara says, "My tama loati." Why does she not go out? Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina melamed sheparcha bat sarat. At that very moment, she had sarat. Right? It's like all of a sudden you have to go out to a party and you're like covered in pimples, right? You don't want to go out, right? Ba Gavriel vasala zanav. And not only that, the Malach Gavriel comes and makes her a tail. Okay, so she has a really nice costume. She's got this tail. There's actually a minhag, yes, it's found in the sources, that people should dress up like animals with tails on Purim, which is why you'll find many people dressed up as lions, bears, I don't know. Bears have tails? No. Lions. Lions is going. Monkeys, yes. Following in the minhag of Vashti. Okay, then we have Charvona. Okay, the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer in the Midrash says, what happened? Esther and Haman and Mordechai are, not Mordechai, Esther, let me rewrite the story. Esther and Haman and Achashverosh are all at a party together, right? And Esther finally comes and says, Haman wants to kill my people, right? And Achashverosh is very, very angry. What happens? At that moment, Charvona, who's Charvona? We don't really know anything about Charvona, but Charvona, who is a servant of the king, jumps up and says, oh, by the way, if you want to get rid of Haman, there's those gallows over there that he just built for Mordechai, and you can use them, right? So it's this question, like, who's this Charvona guy? Like, why all of a sudden does he want to help out the Jewish side of things, right? And so the Midrash comes and says, V'oto sha'a, ma asa Eliyahu, what did Eliyahu and Avi do? Nidmeh lecharvona. Eliyahu and Avi dressed up like Charvona. Echad misarisei hamelech, one of the servants. Amar lo, Aduni hamelech, yesh eitz b'veito shel Haman. King, you should know, there's a tree waiting there in the house of Haman. Miyad tziva hamelech litloto. So Achashverosh decides to hang Mordechai, v'yachti v'yitlu et Haman. Okay, so again, we have this idea, Eliyahu and Avi comes in costume, dressed up as Charvona, in order to give this message to Achashverosh. We have another example. Michael. Okay, what happens? Same scene, okay? Achashverosh finds out that Haman is out to kill the people of his wife, Esther, and he's really angry. He's so angry, he goes out to the garden. Okay. Amar la Melech, the king says to Esther, Umihu ha'adam hazeh, who is this man? Ve'ezehu, right? Who is this guy that wants to kill you? Asher lo libot lasot kin. Amar lo Haman harazeh. It's Haman. Miyad chafu panav. His face gets very upset. He gets very angry. V'melech kam b'chamato mimishteh hayayin. The king gets up in his anger from drinking wine. V'nichnas beginat habitan. He goes out to the garden. Ma'asa Michael? Hitchil mekatzetz nitiyot lefanav. He goes outside. He's so angry. And he sees this guy outside cutting down his trees or his plants. He says to him, who are you? What are you doing to my garden? So he says to him, I'm one of the children of Haman. My father Haman told me that I should ruin your garden. And you can imagine, right? Achashverosh is in this rage already. He's so angry. He comes outside, and there's this guy there saying, I'm the son of Haman, and I'm coming to cut down your garden, right? Miyad chamato barabo v'nivar chema al chema. His anger is like ignited from the other, like one anger on top of another anger, and right away he wants to kill Haman. So again, who's dressed up over here? We have the Malach, Michael, dressed up like one of the sons of Haman. Okay, there's a lot. I'm sure you guys can think of more, right? Okay, next we have Bnei Yisrael. The Jewish people as a whole are dressed up. How are they dressed up? Source number 10 in the Gemara Megillah. Sha'alu Talmidav shel Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. The students of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, Mipnei ma nitchayvu sonein shel Yisrael boto hador kliya. Why? Over here, the word sonein shel Yisrael is a euphemism, right? The enemies of Israel is actually talking about Bnei Yisrael. Why do they not say it? Because they don't want to say anything bad about Bnei Yisrael. So they say, why were the enemies of Israel? Why is it decreed against them that they should be destroyed in the generation of Esther? Amar lahem. So Rishon bar Yochai answers, Mipnei sheishtachavu letzelem, because they bowed down to idols. Okay, they needed to be destroyed because they were worshiping idols. Amru lo. So the students say back to him, V'ki mashve panav yish badavar. So isn't that some sort of bribery? Why do they say it's bribery? Something's not right here. If they were actually worshiping idols, so then they were worthy of being punished. But what happened in the end? They weren't destroyed, right? They were saved. So they said, so what's going on? We understand now why they were deserving, so why weren't they destroyed? Amar lahem, him lo asu el lifnim. They didn't worship idols except outside. Really, lifnim we always think means inside, but lipanim, like on the outside. On the outside, they were worshiping idols. Why? Similar to the Marano, similar to many parts of history, right? They put on a show, ki'ilu, that they were worshiping idols, because that's what they needed to do in order to get by in that generation. But inside, did they believe in the idols? No. Afakadosh Baruch Hu lo oseh imahem ella lipanim. So Hashem also only destroyed them on the outside. He put on a show as if he was going to destroy them, and then they weren't. So here we have Bnei Israel who are dressed up like idol worshippers. They didn't actually really mean it, but on the outside, it looked like they were worshiping idols. Okay, so we have a lot of contestants in this costume competition of Megillat Esther. Some of them were pretty good, right? Esther dressed up with 127 different costumes at the same time, and everyone believed her. That's a pretty good one. I don't know. Who else is a good one? Maybe Vashti. She had a pretty realistically looking tail, because it probably really was real, right? We had a lot of good costumes. So who's the winner of this costume party? So Rav Ayal Vered from Machon Meir says in source number 12, right, he says, there's different reasons that are given for dressing up. Megillat Esther kulam mitchapsim. We find that in Megillat Esther, everyone is dressed up. Esther mitchapeset. Esther's dressed up. V'lo Megillat hazihut shala. She doesn't reveal her identity. Mordechai kivyachol rotzeh tovat Achashverosh. She gives a different costume here. Mordechai kivyachol rotzeh tovat Achashverosh avach choshev al tovat ha'am hayudi. Mordechai puts on a show ki'ilu he wants the good of Achashverosh, but in the end, who's he really looking out for? Am Yisrael. Haman mitchapes l'dorish tovato shel Achashverosh. Haman puts on a show as if he is looking out again for the good of Achashverosh. Aval, what does he really want? Rotzet hamlucha. He wants to become the king. But who's the winner? Hamitchapes harashi. The winner of the Megillah contest is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sheshmo lo muskar le'orech kol Megillah. Because he is the winner of the costume party because we don't even see him at all. Right? He's actually invisible. Imagine you have this like a costume competition and one kid gets up but you don't see him. That's really good competition. We don't see him. He doesn't appear in the Megillah. Shmo lo muskar le'orech kol Megillah. His name is not mentioned once in the Megillah. But we all know that he is the one who's pulling all of the strings. All of those costumes, and we saw it really in some of these. Because, for example, what does it mean that Charvona got up and he was really Eliyahu Navi? What does that mean? Right? I don't know if there was really an Eliyahu Navi that was putting on a costume that looked like Charvona. But what it means is that the fact that somebody from Achashverosh's kingdom would get up and say, hey, by the way, you should really kill Haman on the tree, means that Hashem was putting words into somebody's mouth, right? He is behind the scenes of everything. Atachboset omeret la'adam. A costume says to a person, barur lecha shema she'ata ro'eh b'chutz. You should know that it should be clear to you that whatever you see on the outside, ze lo ma shekori b'fnim. It's not what's happening inside. L'chein ta'amik. And therefore, you should look into this further. The costume is a sure sign that something deeper is going on the inside. And so Hashem is the winner of this contest. right? Now, the Gemara, we know this is a famous Gemara in Chulin that says, Esther mina Torah minayin, right? Where do we have a hint to Esther in the Torah itself? What's the pasuk that's quoted? They say, V'anochi haster astir. Hashem says, I'm going to hide my face. Very cute, right? Esther, haster, astir, it sounds all the same, right? Nice, cute hint. But no, it's not a cute hint. It's actually what the Megillah is all about, right? Because what's this pasuk taken from? It's in Parshat Vayilech, right? Where we're talking about going into Galut. And Hashem says, V'anochi haster astir panai b'yomahu. I'm going to hide my face. Akol asher hara asher asa ki pana Elokim echlim. This is the Tochacha, he says, I'm going to go into hiding. And this is something that we're unfortunately very familiar with. This is the time period that we're living in. This is Galut, right? Hashem's face is hidden. Haster astir panai. And, right, in the world that we live in, Hashem is definitely there. Right? He's pulling all the strings, but there's hastarat panim. He's in costume. We can't see him. And I think Miri mentioned this a little bit, but right, this is what we've been seeing. This is what we always see if we look for it, but it's what we've been seeing over the past 2 years, right? So many different stories of so many different nisim, things that happened in the past 2 years, for the good and for the bad. But we see Hashem's hand. We know Hashem's hand's there. Whether it's like the Iranian attack before Pesach last year, without one missile hurting anyone, right? Or whether it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when it was, right, with the bus bombings, right? So many miracles where we see Hashem's hand is there, but it's hidden, right? It's hidden in nature, right? We look back at the story of Megillah Esther, and it's so clear to us. Right? It's so clear. Like you look at the way the Megillah is written, and it took place over the span of 12 years. But when you read it, it sounds like, okay, so then Hashem made this happen, and then Achashverosh couldn't sleep, and then Haman came in, and everything works out so perfectly. But do you think they saw it? Probably not. 12 years is a very long time to actually be able to trace and see how Hashem is pulling the strings. And it's the same thing with us. We don't see it, but Hashem's there. And that's really the lesson of the Megillah and the lesson of wearing costumes, right? We think it's like a joke, it's a cute thing, or wearing masks, costumes, very nice, right? But there's something so deep that's going on there, because it's a lesson that we need to hear so much in today's day, right? We need to know that no matter how disguised Hashem is, no matter how much His name doesn't appear in the Megillah and in the news and what we see, right? He's always there for us behind the scenes. And because as we go through all of life's mysteries, we're also often going to be confused and not really understand what's going on. But behind every single mask and every ambiguity, there's depth and there's clarity. There's a lot of uncertainty, but if we understand that Hashem is running the show and He has very clear goals and there's a vision, and sometimes we can get a glimpse of it and sometimes it remains hidden forever, but we know that there's a concept like that, then we can feel like we're in good hands, because sometimes we don't know where things are going, but if we understand, well, it's very clear that some things are going somewhere, then we know that there's Hashem behind that, and then we can feel confident in that. And one day we'll be able to really unmask Hashem, so to speak, and understand the depth and the beauty of His ways, B'ezrat Hashem.